In this country, intelligence services are far too powerful, and they're far too powerful in the United States. I'll tell you where they're less powerful, actually, is in Russia, because they've changed the setup. And because they've got experience of overmighty intelligence services, the politicians have pretty much got them where they want them.
Well, also,
whereas in the West, it's completely the other way around.
Okay,
We've got the delusion of democracy and the reality that this is actually a semi-totalitarian
bringing corrupt people in
setup.
line is something that's definitely been going on over in Malaysia with the this report from the BBC World Service earlier this week. A guy called Tom Wright has written a book about the 1MDB scandal, and this is with these two characters, Jho Low and the former Prime Minister Najib Razak, who have now led to, basically the 1MDB was an investment bank which got set up, and the Prime Minister allegedly took millions of pounds out of it, put it straight into his personal bank account. And it was used to make Hollywood films, anything they wanted to, but it wasn't being used for the investment it was supposed to be for. And there was an enormous amount of fraud involving something like 15 Goldman Sachs bankers, and there's now warrants out for their arrest by the Malaysians. So it's interesting, isn't it? And the whole thing hinges again around the state prosecutor. In this case, as you'll hear from Tom Wright, the assassination of the state prosecutor in Malaysia, Kevin Moraes.
Well, you're referring to the public prosecutor in Malaysia who was involved in the drafting of the arrest warrant for former Prime Minister Najib Razak. This story is really about one of the largest ever financial heists. $4 to $5 billion, maybe even more, was stolen from the Malaysian treasury. And Najib Razak, the then Prime Minister, oversaw this fraud. And he himself took $680 million into his personal bank account. A very complex tale, but the long and the short of it is that some people in the Malaysian government found out about it, and they started to, the Attorney General at the time, started to draw up documents in an attempt to arrest and prosecute Najib Razak. Najib Razak got wind of that. He fired his Attorney General. He shut down a newspaper. He took a bunch of, and Malaysia is a nominal democracy, took a bunch of steps that turned Malaysia towards sort of autocracy. And then this prosecutor who'd been involved in drafting up the arrest warrant for Najib Razak, a draft arrest warrant, was found dead in a barrel in Kuala Lumpur. And the story is that he was killed for another reason, some other corruption scandal that he was investigating. But the fear is that he was somehow killed because of his involvement with that draft arrest warrant for Najib Razak, and that it really has not been solved yet. And for us in writing Billion Dollar Whale, that was really one of the key moments when Najib Razak and his people around him tried to stop the truth getting out about what had happened.
This huge amount of money came from people who thought, some people anyway, who thought they were investing in something real.
Yes. So how this scam worked, Malaysia set up a sovereign wealth fund, a fund to manage money of the country and to invest for the people of Malaysia to improve its economy. A young Malaysian called Jho Low, who was 28 years at the time and had the ear of Najib Razak, the Prime Minister, and Najib Razak sort of covered for him and allowed him to run this fund from behind the scenes. The fund was called 1MDB. And they simply stole the money. And the way they stole it was they pretended to do investments with other funds in other countries in the Middle East. And they didn't do anything. They were supposed to create a new financial center in Kuala Lumpur. They were supposed to build green energy businesses, but they didn't do anything. They just took the money. So the money was used by Jho Low to fund a Hollywood entertainment industry. And Najib used his share to sort of buy off politicians and voters in Malaysia.
And it worked.
Well,
it worked. Begin with.
It worked to begin with. Eventually, the whole house of cards came crashing down. In last year during elections. Najib lost the election, and mainly because of all the details of this started coming out, in our book and in other places. And he's now facing trial in Malaysia.
Bank compliance officers started to notice that this was a very strange path for money to be taking back, 2009? So why didn't that stop these activities?
So what Billion Dollar Whale shows is that the compliance functions in banks and the auditors and all these institutions that are supposed to stop fraud in the capitalist system don't work. And the reason they don't work is because it's in no one's interests to stop big flows of money when that's that's where your salary is coming from, right? The way Jho Low got away with this, he would move hundreds of millions of dollars around, and he would argue to the compliance people, this is government-to-government business, so you don't need to worry about it. Like, I have the backing of, we have the Malaysian Prime Minister, this is a state fund in Malaysia, we're dealing with state funds in the Middle East, and he always would call this government-to-government business. And and frankly, I think that a lot of people that dealt with him, a lot of financial institutions that helped move the money, they knew that it was shady, right? They made so much money from this, the bankers involved in it, it made their careers. And that's, that time and again, that's what Jho Low preys on. He knows he figures out how the world really works, and he uses that to bamboozle compliance and bamboozle people.
Is Jho Low a clever man? I mean, here he came from college. He was just out of college and he got involved in this amazing billion-dollar enterprise. I mean, there's some skills there, whether they're creditable or not.
Well, we tried to make it. We didn't want to make the book preachy. He's an extremely skillful person. He will go down in history as one of the preeminent fraudsters of our time. His great skill was networking. He wanted to meet powerful people.
Well, he organised great parties.
He got to know the Sultan of Brunei's family when he was at Harrow, and he would go to China White, the nightclub that used to be popular in London, and he would book tables under the name of the Brunei royal family, even though he was, they didn't know anything about that. He would organise parties at Wharton where he didn't pay the tab; he'd pay for everyone, $40,000, and then not pay the bar tab. And he was building up a reputation from the very start for being richer than he was.
Where is he now?
So since the news about Jho Low broke 4 years ago, and Najib was still in power at that time, Najib denied everything, and he told Jho Low to leave Malaysia. It was too sort of hot for him to live there, so he went to China. And Jho Low has been charged in the US and in Malaysia. There's an ongoing criminal case against Jho Low in the US. But Jho Low will not come to face trial in the US. He says he will not get a fair trial. But has not explained why. And Jho Low still is yet to come and face or answer questions about, what he's done.
Well, this is an enormous financial scandal. As I said, 15 Goldman Sachs bankers warrants are out for their arrest. Martin, how come this sort of thing won't happen in London?
Well, I mean, it's all linked. You can bet.
Well, I'm talking about the arrests, not the fraud.
No, exactly. I mean, this is a tip of an iceberg, which is enormous, and of course there are geopolitical implications for all of this. Malaysia is regarded as a non-reliable country by the Western Alliance because of its
rule of law.
Sorry,
because it's got a rule of law.
Well, you could argue that that's part of it. Yes, I mean, but Mahathir Mohamad, who's now back in charge, who's an old guy now, he's in his 90s, he questioned 9/11 and said, well, we don't believe the story you're telling us here. And the other thing that they did in 1998, when there was basically an engineered crisis in Southeast Asia by by Wall Street and the City of London, they brought in exchange controls, which, of course, exchange controls were just normal practice for many decades after World War II.
But Jho Low was straight out of college. He's asking the question there, was he the mastermind? Clearly he wasn't. The actual international bankers, the banksters, the Goldman Sachs people would have probably just offered him a job, knowing that he would have to keep his mouth shut. Yeah,
but what you want is young gophers like that who do it all, and then, of course, if anybody takes the rap, then it's them. But, of course, underlying all of this is the fact that fraud has become the normal way in which financial markets operate. And basically we bailed out fraudsters in 2008, and far from being punished, it's basically a win-win for them. They steal and steal and steal, and when everything goes down the drain, the government ponies, or the people pony up to bail it all out, and they carry on as before. Ultimately, that's not going to carry on.
People may well have seen the film The Wolves of Wall Street. This is financed from the fraud here. The Wolves of Wall Street, the feature film.
Yeah, well, it wouldn't be surprising, would it? I mean, basically, the drug cartels bailed out the banking system in 2008, and everybody pontificates about we're going to do something like county lines, drug gangs, and all the rest of it. But the banking system's based on the drugs industry. That's what keeps it going. It had all collapsed years ago if money laundering wasn't going on. And this is the reality of what's happened. We need to nationalise the banking system and run it as a public utility, but that won't happen until we've gone through another horrendous crash, I'm afraid.